"You're not a team player," Gregory said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. "Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else." I sat across from him in his corner office, watching as he delivered what he clearly thought was a devastating blow. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant chatter of my colleagues in the hallway, completely unaware that their department head was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. "I understand," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Should I clean out my desk now?" Gregory's eyebrows shot up slightly. He had expected tears, maybe pleading, certainly not this composed response. "Yes, I think that would be best. Human Resources will contact you about your final paperwork." I nodded and stood up, smoothing down my navy blazer. "Of course. Thank you for the opportunity to work here, Gregory." As I walked toward the door, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. He was probably wondering why I wasn't begging for my job, why I wasn't promising to be more of a team player, if he'd just give me another chance. What Gregory didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. My name is Vanessa Kim, and until 15 minutes ago, I was the senior marketing analyst at North Peak Engineering in Portland, Oregon. At 34, I had worked my way up from an entry-level position to leading the highest-performing team in our department. My campaigns had generated over $2 million in new business this year alone, and my team consistently exceeded every quarterly target. None of that mattered to Gregory anymore, though. Not since I had politely declined his third dinner invitation in as many weeks. I walked through the open office space where my team sat, their heads buried in their monitors, completely focused on the product launch campaign we had been working on for months. Jessica looked up from her computer as I passed her desk. "Hey, Vanessa, are we still on for the client presentation tomorrow?" she asked, her bright smile faltering when she saw my expression. "Actually, you'll need to coordinate with Gregory on that," I said softly. "I won't be here tomorrow." The confusion in her eyes was heartbreaking. My team trusted me, relied on me, and now they would be left to deal with the fallout of Gregory's decision. But there was nothing I could do about that now, except ensure that this never happened to anyone else. 6 months earlier, I had been thrilled to join North Peak Engineering. The company had a stellar reputation in the construction industry, designing everything from residential complexes to massive infrastructure projects. As someone who had always been passionate about marketing in the engineering sector, it felt like the perfect fit. Gregory had seemed professional during my interview process. He was 42, married with 2 teenage daughters, and had been with the company for 8 years. He spoke enthusiastically about the department's goals and seemed genuinely impressed with my background in technical marketing. I felt optimistic about working under his leadership. The first few months were everything I had hoped for. My team and I developed a comprehensive digital marketing strategy that increased lead generation by 35%. I implemented new tracking systems that gave us unprecedented insight into our target demographics. Gregory praised my work publicly and even recommended me for a company-wide innovation award. But somewhere around month 4, things began to shift. It started subtly. Gregory would linger by my desk a little too long when discussing projects. He began asking about my weekend plans and commenting on my appearance. "You look nice today, Vanessa," became a regular greeting, always delivered with a smile that made my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off initially. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent comments. I had dealt with overly familiar bosses before, and I knew how to maintain professional boundaries without creating workplace drama. The first dinner invitation came on a Friday afternoon in month 5. Gregory appeared at my desk just as I was packing up for the weekend. "Great work on the Morrison account presentation," he said, perching on the edge of my desk. "How about we celebrate with dinner tonight? I know a great Italian place downtown." I kept my response light, but firm. "That's very kind, but I have plans tonight. Thank you, though." His smile flickered for just a moment, before returning full force. Of course. Maybe another time. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The invitations became more frequent, always framed as work-related celebrations or team-building opportunities. When I declined, Gregory's demeanor would shift slightly. He became more critical of my work, questioning decisions that he had previously praised. He started scheduling last-minute meetings that ran late, then suggesting we continue the conversation over dinner. My performance reviews remained stellar, but I could sense the change in our dynamic. Gregory was no longer seeing me as a valuable team member. He was seeing me as a challenge to overcome. The professional respect I had worked so hard to earn was evaporating, replaced by something that made me deeply uncomfortable. By month 6, I knew I needed to protect myself. That's when I started recording our conversations. The recording app on my phone became my lifeline. Every interaction with Gregory was documented, time-stamped, and stored securely in the cloud. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I would probably never need the recordings, but my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with the situation. The breakthrough moment came 3 weeks ago during our quarterly performance review. Gregory had called me into his office to discuss my annual evaluation, which should have been a straightforward conversation about my achievements and goals for the following year. "Your numbers are impressive as always," Gregory said, scrolling through the report on his computer screen. "The team really responds well to your leadership style." "Thank you," I replied, relaxing slightly. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe we could get back to a normal working relationship. "In fact," Gregory continued, turning to face me with that familiar smile, "I think it's time we discussed your future here. There might be a promotion opportunity coming up in the next quarter." My heart skipped with excitement. A promotion would mean more responsibility, better pay, and validation of all the hard work I had put into building my career. That sounds wonderful. What would the role entail? Gregory leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. "Well, that depends on how committed you are to being part of the leadership team. It requires a lot of collaboration, relationship building, sometimes working closely together outside of normal office hours." The way he emphasized "closely together" sent a chill down my spine. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. "Of course," I said carefully, "I'm always willing to put in extra effort for important projects." "Excellent." Gregory's smile widened. "Why don't we start with dinner this Friday? We can discuss the details of the position, maybe talk about your long-term career goals." "I'm thinking somewhere nice. Maybe that French restaurant on Northwest 23rd Avenue. There it was, the quid pro quo that I had been dreading. A promotion dangled like a carrot, contingent on my willingness to blur the lines between professional and personal relationships. "I appreciate the consideration," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But I prefer to keep business discussions in the office. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week to go over the details." Gregory's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "Vanessa, successful people in this industry understand that relationships matter. Networking, building trust, showing that you're committed to the team. These things don't happen in conference rooms." "I understand," I replied, "but I'm not comfortable with dinner meetings. I hope you can respect that boundary." The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. Gregory's jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke, his voice had lost all warmth. "I see. Well, I suppose we'll have to reassess your fit for leadership roles here." That was the moment I knew my job was in jeopardy. The retaliation began almost immediately. Gregory started excluding me from high-level meetings that I had always attended. Important emails that should have been copied to me mysteriously went to other team members instead. Projects that had been mine for months were suddenly reassigned without explanation. My team noticed the changes, though they didn't understand the cause. Jessica approached me one afternoon, her brow furrowed with concern. "Vanessa, is everything okay? Gregory said he's taking over the Henderson Industries presentation next week. I thought that was your project." I forced a smile, not wanting to drag my team into the toxic situation. Just some reshuffling of responsibilities, nothing to worry about. But privately, I was documenting everything. Every slight, every reassignment, every passive-aggressive comment was recorded and cataloged. I also began researching employment law, spending my evenings reading about hostile work environments and retaliation cases. The second dinner invitation came 2 weeks later, right after I had successfully closed a major deal with a new client. Gregory summoned me to his office, ostensibly to congratulate me on the win. "Outstanding work on the Cascade construction contract," he said, though his tone lacked genuine enthusiasm. "That's exactly the kind of initiative that makes someone promotion material." "Here we go again," I thought, discreetly pressing the record button on my phone app. "Thank you," I replied. "The team put in a lot of excellent work on that proposal." "They did, but leadership comes from the top. Speaking of which, I think it's time we had that dinner conversation about your future here. How about tomorrow night?" I had practiced this response in my head dozens of times. "I appreciate your interest in my career development, Gregory. But as I mentioned before, I prefer to keep business discussions in the office. Perhaps we could schedule a formal meeting with human resources present to discuss advancement opportunities." The suggestion of involving human resources was deliberate. I wanted to see how he would react to the prospect of outside oversight. Gregory's mask slipped completely. His face flushed red, and his voice turned cold. "Vanessa, I'm beginning to think you don't understand how things work here. This company values team players, people who are willing to go the extra mile to build relationships. If you're not interested in being part of that culture, maybe you should reconsider your career path." "I'm very committed to my career," I said firmly. "I just believe in maintaining professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries," Gregory repeated, his tone mocking. "That's an interesting way to describe being uncooperative." The conversation ended there, but I could see the wheels turning in Gregory's head. He was done with subtlety. The gloves were about to come off. Over the next week, my work environment became increasingly hostile. Gregory began micromanaging every aspect of my job, demanding detailed reports on tasks that had never required oversight before. He criticized presentations that had previously earned praise, finding fault with formatting and word choices that he had approved just days earlier. The most damaging incident occurred during a client meeting with Portland Metro Development. I had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive marketing strategy for their upcoming housing project. But when we sat down with their executive team, Gregory undermined me at every turn. "What Vanessa is proposing is certainly creative," he said, with a patronizing smile. "But I think we need to take a more conservative approach. Let me walk you through some alternative strategies." He proceeded to present a watered-down version of my original proposal, taking credit for the research and insights I had developed. The clients looked confused by the mixed messaging, and I could see our credibility slipping away in real time. After the meeting, I confronted Gregory privately. What just happened in there was unprofessional and damaging to our client relationship. Gregory's response was ice cold. What happened in there was leadership. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about boundaries and more time being a team player, you'd understand the difference. That night, I called my attorney. Margaret Chen? No, I caught myself before thinking her name. My attorney's name was Margaret Thompson, and she specialized in employment law. I had found her through a referral from a former colleague who had dealt with a similar situation at her previous job. When I called her office, her secretary scheduled an appointment for the following day. Margaret's office was in downtown Portland, occupying the 15th floor of a sleek glass building. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. After I explained my situation and played several of the most damning recordings, she leaned back in her chair and nodded grimly. "You've done exactly the right thing by documenting everything," she said. "These recordings clearly establish a pattern of harassment and retaliation. The fact that he's tying your job security to personal dinner invitations is textbook quid pro quo harassment." "What are my options?" I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "We have several paths forward," Margaret explained. "You could file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, pursue internal resolution through your company's Human Resources Department, or prepare for potential litigation if the situation escalates further." "What would you recommend?" Margaret considered this carefully. "Given that your supervisor has already begun retaliating against you professionally, I suspect this situation will continue to deteriorate. I'd recommend preparing for all possibilities while trying to protect your current position as long as possible." She was right, of course. When I returned to work the next day, the tension was palpable. Gregory barely acknowledged my presence during our morning department meeting, and when he did address me directly, his tone was dismissive and cold. The third dinner invitation came exactly 1 week later, and it would prove to be the final straw. I was working late, trying to catch up on projects that Gregory had unnecessarily complicated with his new micromanagement requirements. The office was nearly empty, with just a few dedicated employees scattered throughout the floor. When Gregory appeared at my desk at 7 p.m., I knew immediately what was coming. "Still here, Vanessa? That's dedication," he said, though his tone suggested he found my work ethic more annoying than admirable. "Just finishing up the quarterly reports," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "You know, this reminds me, we still haven't had that dinner conversation about your future here. Third time's the charm, right? How about we head out now and grab something at that steakhouse on Burnside?" This time I looked up and met his gaze directly. "Gregory, I've made it clear that I'm not interested in dinner meetings. I'd prefer to discuss my career development through official channels." His friendly facade cracked completely. "Official channels," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea how this industry actually works? Do you think successful people get ahead by hiding behind policies and procedures?" "I think successful people get ahead through competence and hard work," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. Gregory leaned down, placing his hands on my desk and bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Let me be very clear, Vanessa. Your attitude problem is affecting your team's morale and this department's productivity. If you can't adjust your approach to collaboration, you might find that your skills aren't as valuable here as you think they are." The threat was unmistakable, and I had it all on recording. "I understand," I said quietly. But what Gregory didn't understand was that he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. The final confrontation happened on a Friday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after my meeting with Margaret Thompson. I had spent those weeks meticulously documenting every interaction, every slight, every professional setback that could be traced back to my refusal to have dinner with Gregory. My team's morale was suffering under his increasingly erratic management style. He had begun questioning their work as well, apparently trying to build a case that my leadership was somehow infecting the entire department with attitude problems. Jessica had confided in me that she was considering looking for another job, and 2 other team members had expressed similar concerns. The breaking point came when Gregory announced that he was reassigning the Morrison Industries account, my biggest client and most successful ongoing project, to a junior analyst who had been with the company for less than 6 months. "I think Kevin could benefit from the exposure to high-level client management," Gregory announced during our team meeting, as if this decision made perfect sense. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that the Morrison account was complex and required deep knowledge of their industry and specific needs. Reassigning it to Kevin wasn't just arbitrary, it was potentially damaging to the client relationship and the company's reputation. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with Gregory. We went to his office and I closed the door behind us, making sure my phone was recording. "Gregory, I need to understand the reasoning behind reassigning the Morrison account," I began. "That client relationship has taken months to develop, and they specifically requested to continue working with me." Gregory didn't even pretend to have a legitimate business justification. Vanessa, I've been very patient with your attitude, but I'm starting to question whether you're really committed to being part of this team. Mo, what specifically about my attitude concerns you? I asked, keeping my voice professional. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your unwillingness to engage in the kind of relationship building that's essential in this business. Your insistence on maintaining unnecessary barriers between yourself and leadership. There it was. The clearest statement yet that my job performance was being judged based on my refusal to socialize with him outside of work. Are you saying that my professional relationships should extend beyond office hours? I asked, wanting to get his answer on record. I'm saying that people who want to advance in this company need to show that they're willing to invest in building trust and rapport with their supervisors. If you can't do that, then maybe this isn't the right environment for you. The ultimatum was finally out in the open. Submit to his inappropriate advances disguised as networking, or face continued retaliation that would eventually force me out. I see, I said calmly. And if I continue to decline dinner invitations, you'll continue to reassign my projects and undermine my position here? Gregory's face reddened. I'm not undermining anything. I'm trying to manage a department, and that requires team members who are willing to be team players. If you can't understand that basic concept, then yes, you might be happier somewhere else. Understood, I replied. In that case, I'll need to think about whether this is the right fit for me. Take all the time you need, Gregory said with a cold smile. But don't take too long. There are plenty of people who would be grateful for the opportunities you're throwing away. I left his office knowing that the end was near. Gregory had painted himself into a corner, and his next move was entirely predictable. I called Margaret Thompson and told her to prepare the paperwork. The termination notice came the following Monday morning. You're not a team player, Gregory said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else. I smiled as I packed my personal items into the cardboard box that Human Resources had provided. My coffee mug, the small succulent plant that had brightened my desk, the framed photo of my graduation from business school, all of it went into the box with careful precision. Should I expect my final paycheck to include severance? I asked conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. Gregory shrugged. That's between you and Human Resources. I'm sure they'll be in touch. I stood up, box in hand, and looked around the office one last time. My team was watching from their desks, confusion and concern written across their faces. Jessica looked like she might cry. Well, it's been educational, I said to Gregory, extending my hand for a final handshake. He hesitated for a moment before accepting it, probably wondering why I wasn't more upset. Good luck, Vanessa. Thank you, I replied. I have a feeling I won't need it. As I walked through the office toward the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to Margaret Thompson. It's done. He terminated me today at 2:30 p.m., exactly as we predicted. Her response came back immediately. Perfect. I'll file the complaint first thing Monday morning. Are you ready for this? I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. More than ready. What Gregory didn't know was that I had 47 recordings of our interactions over the past 4 months. What he didn't know was that I had documented every instance of retaliation, every professional slight, every inappropriate comment. What he didn't know was that Margaret Thompson had already prepared a comprehensive complaint that would be filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries simultaneously. Most importantly, what Gregory didn't know was that I had spent the past month quietly building relationships with former employees who had left the company under mysterious circumstances. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out into the Portland afternoon with a sense of anticipation that I hadn't felt in months. Monday morning arrived with a fury that Gregory never saw coming. I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown when my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. The first few went to voicemail, but by the 5th call, I decided to answer. Vanessa, this is Todd Williams from Human Resources at North Peak. We need to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss your departure from the company. I took a sip of my latte and smiled. I'm afraid I'm not available for meetings this week. My attorney has advised me to direct all communications through her office. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Your attorney? Margaret Thompson at Thompson & Associates. I believe you'll be hearing from her shortly if you haven't already. I hung up and checked my email. Margaret had sent me a copy of the formal complaint she had filed that morning. 37 pages of detailed allegations, supported by time-stamped recordings and documentation that painted a clear picture of sexual harassment and retaliation. The complaint had also been forwarded to local employment rights organizations and legal advocacy groups. By noon, 3 different reporters had reached out requesting interviews about workplace harassment in the engineering industry. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Kevin from your old team. Gregory called an emergency meeting this morning and canceled all client meetings for the week. What's going on? I didn't respond, but I smiled knowing that the chaos was just beginning. By Tuesday, the story had been picked up by the Portland Business Journal. By Wednesday, it was trending on social media under the hashtag #NorthPeak Harassment. Gregory had made one fatal error in his calculations. He assumed I would disappear quietly. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he had been. Margaret called me Thursday afternoon with an update that made my day complete. Vanessa, I just got off the phone with NorthPeak's legal team. They want to discuss a settlement. The tables had finally turned. As I reflected on the journey from victim to victor, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply the quiet satisfaction of watching someone face the consequences of their own choices. Gregory had taught me that documentation and patience are the most powerful weapons against workplace predators, and I would carry that lesson forward into whatever came next.
You're a horrible daughter, my mom's voice thundered through the phone, cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I froze, holding my phone tighter. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, she snapped. After all I've done for you, you couldn't even upgrade me to first class for this trip? What kind of child does that to their mother? I took a deep breath, gripping the counter to steady myself. Mom, I paid for your entire trip, I said evenly, trying to keep my voice steady. Flights, the hotel, the tours, everything. Do you even realize how much time and effort went into planning this? She scoffed. And yet you couldn't do this one small thing to make it special? Honestly, Kristen, I don't know what's wrong with you. Your sister would have done it without a second thought. My name is Kristen, and for as long as I can remember, my mom has made me feel like I'm never enough. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the straight-A student, the one who landed a stable career in marketing and saved diligently for my future. My sister, Danielle, was the golden child, warm, charming, and effortlessly adored. This trip to Europe wasn't just a vacation for my mom. It was supposed to be my way of saying, "Look, Mom, I care about you." I thought it might bridge the gap between us, prove to her that I wasn't the selfish, ungrateful person she often implied I was. It had taken years of saving every spare penny, skipping vacations, and living frugally. Flights, accommodations in upscale hotels, guided tours, and even tickets to cultural performances she'd always dreamed of attending. It was all planned meticulously. But none of that mattered now. All she could focus on was the fact that her seat wasn't in first class. "Mom," I said carefully, forcing calm into my voice, "I thought you'd be happy. It's a beautiful itinerary. You'll have an amazing time." "Nodding, Coach, I won't," she spat back. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. "Well, I hope you enjoy the trip anyway," I said, ending the call before I could say something I'd regret. Later that day, as I pulled up to the airport to drop her off, her parting words cut deep. "Maybe if you ever grow up, you'll figure out how to treat people properly," she said, striding into the terminal without so much as a glance back. Driving home, her words echoed in my mind, sharp and cutting. But by the time I parked, something shifted inside me. If she thought I was a horrible daughter, Maybe it was time for her to understand just how wrong she was. When I walked back into my apartment, her words kept replaying in my mind. Maybe if you ever grow up? I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to swallow it down. I wasn't going to cry. Not over this. I'd worked so hard to make this trip perfect. I had spent years skipping vacations, declining nights out with friends, and picking up extra work just to save enough. I wanted to give her something special, a way to experience the world beyond her small, predictable routine. I thought it might make her happy, maybe even proud of me. Instead, she had called me selfish, embarrassed me, and stormed into the airport without a word of thanks. This wasn't new. For as long as I could remember, my mom had a way of turning everything into a critique of my shortcomings. When I aced a test, she'd ask why it wasn't perfect. If I got a promotion, she'd find a way to say Danielle could have done it faster. And Danielle. Of course, Danielle was always the one who could do no wrong. She didn't have a steady job. She didn't contribute financially. But somehow, she was the golden child, the one who could make time to be around, while I was the one stuck playing catch-up. But this trip? This was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be the gesture that said, "Look, Mom, I care. Look how much I've sacrificed for you." Instead, it had become another way for her to belittle me. I opened my laptop, pulling up the confirmation email for her flights. 2 economy class tickets, round trip. Carefully chosen to be as comfortable as possible without breaking the bank. The thought of canceling the whole trip crossed my mind for a moment, but I couldn't. The hotel and tours were non-refundable, and even though she didn't appreciate it, I had put too much effort into planning to let it all go to waste. But then my eyes landed on the return flight. Next to it was a small blue button. Manage booking. Canceling just the return flight wouldn't cost me a dime. It wouldn't affect her vacation at all. She'd still have her dream trip. But when it came time to come home, she'd be on her own. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Was this too much? Was it cruel? Her voice echoed in my mind again. You're selfish, embarrassing. The hesitation disappeared. With a single click, the screen refreshed and a confirmation email landed in my inbox. The return flight was officially canceled. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of control. The next few days passed in a blur, but not without constant reminders of the trip I had so painstakingly planned. My mom didn't call me after she landed. I wasn't surprised. Instead, she took to social media, flooding her account with posts about her incredible European adventure. The first post showed her standing outside the airport in Paris, a wide smile plastered across her face. Living the dream, tagging everyone to see. I rolled my eyes, setting my phone down on the counter. She continued to post throughout the trip, pictures of the elegant hotel lobby, the picturesque views of Parisian streets, the gourmet meals she'd clearly made a show of photographing before eating. Her captions oozed gratitude, but I knew better. She didn't tag me again after that first post, but the messages were clear. Each one was dripping with an air of smugness. Part of me wanted to confront her, to call her out for the audacity of publicly crediting me while privately calling me selfish and embarrassing. But I stayed quiet, letting her have her moment. Because I knew her real moment was coming. On the 4th day, she posted a video from a luxury dinner cruise. Truly the trip of a lifetime, she said to the camera, raising a glass of champagne. By this point, I wasn't checking her updates out of curiosity but anticipation. Every photo and post felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I couldn't help but wonder what she'd think when she realized her return flight was gone. Would she assume it was a mistake? Would she lash out at the airline staff or try to guilt-trip me the moment she found out? Either way, it didn't matter. She'd have to deal with it herself. The night before her scheduled return, I got a text from my sister, Danielle. Mom's been texting me nonstop about how amazing the trip is, she wrote. She said you helped her with it. I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. Danielle had no idea about the canceled flight, or the years of frustration and hurt that had led to it. To her, everything looked perfect. "Glad she's enjoying herself," I finally typed back. It wasn't a lie. I was glad she was enjoying the trip, but what I was really looking forward to was the reckoning waiting for her at the airport. For once, she was going to feel the weight of her entitlement. And maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how much her words and actions had cost her. The day of her return flight finally arrived. I had been carrying an odd mix of nerves and anticipation all morning, knowing this was the moment everything would unravel. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen and I took a deep breath before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Kristen," she hissed, her voice sharp and panicked. "Why is my flight canceled?" I almost smiled at how quickly she got to the point. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning confusion. "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "I just tried to check in and the airline said my ticket has been canceled. What's going on?" "Oh, that," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Yeah, I canceled it." Her sharp intake of breath was almost satisfying. "You canceled it? Why would you do that?" "Because, Mom," I began, keeping my voice calm and measured. "I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be left hanging. After all, you were pretty clear about how you feel about me as a daughter." "What are you talking about?" she demanded, though her voice had softened slightly. "You called me a horrible daughter," I reminded her. "After everything I did for you, after I spent years saving for this trip and planning every detail to make it special for you, and instead of saying thank you, you insulted me." There was a long pause on her end. Then she sighed, exasperated. "Kristen, you're overreacting. You know I didn't mean it like that." "You didn't mean it?" I repeated, my voice firmer now. "You said it. And you've said things like that my entire life. I've always bent over backward to make you happy, and all you ever do is criticize me. So no, Mom, I'm not overreacting. I'm done." "Done?" she echoed, her voice rising again. "What does that even mean? You're just going to leave me stranded here?" "You're not stranded," I said matter-of-factly. "You have options. You can book another flight. Or maybe Danielle can help you. Either way, this isn't my problem anymore." Her tone shifted quickly from anger to desperation. "Kristen, please, I don't have the money for another ticket. I can't believe you do this to me. I'm your mother." I let her words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Figure it out, Mom. You've always told me to grow up and take responsibility for myself. Now it's your turn." Before she could say anything else, I ended the call and set the phone down. My heart was pounding, but there was a quiet satisfaction brewing underneath the nerves. I wasn't bending to her will anymore. The phone calls and messages started pouring in not long after our conversation ended. "Kristen, you can't just leave me here like this," one voicemail screamed. "Do you know how humiliating this is? I'm at the airport trying to explain to the staff why my flight doesn't exist, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy." Another one whined. The texts weren't much better. "How could you do this to me? What would people think if they knew you abandoned your own mother in Europe?" I stared at my phone, unmoved. Each message felt like a desperate attempt to regain control, but they didn't carry the same weight they once did. By the afternoon, her tone shifted. The calls were less frequent, and the texts took on a pleading edge. "Kristen, I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. Please, just help me get home." "Do you want me to beg? Fine, I'm begging. I can't afford a new ticket and I don't know what to do." I read the messages carefully, trying to determine if she was being sincere or just manipulating me again. It was hard to tell. After years of emotional tug-of-war, I had learned not to take her words at face value. Still, a small part of me felt guilty. This was my mom, after all. She had given me life, raised me, and supported me in her own flawed way. Did she deserve this? But then I remembered her parting words at the airport. "Maybe if you ever grow up, you'll figure out how to treat people properly." The guilt faded. By evening, the desperation in her messages reached its peak. Kristen, I'm sleeping on a bench at the airport. I have no way to get home and I can't stay here. Please, I'm begging you. For a brief moment, I almost picked up the phone, but then I reminded myself why I had done this. This wasn't just about the trip or the canceled flight. It was about the years of dismissal, the constant criticism, the way she made me feel small no matter how much I gave. If I let her off the hook now, nothing would change. Instead, I texted Danielle. Mom's having trouble getting home. If you want to help her, feel free. I'm done. Danielle called me immediately, sounding half annoyed, half concerned. Kristen, what's going on? Mom says you canceled her ticket? I did, I replied calmly. She called me a horrible daughter and treated me like garbage after I paid for this whole trip. I'm done bending over backward for her, Danielle. She can figure this out herself. Danielle sighed. I get it, but don't you think this is a bit much? No, I said firmly. This is exactly enough. The next morning, the texts stopped, and my phone was unusually quiet. For a moment, I wondered if she had managed to figure something out. Maybe Danielle had swooped in to save the day, or maybe my mom had found another way home. Either way, I wasn't going to be the one to check in on her. But then, just before lunch, my phone buzzed again. Kristen, she wrote, I don't know what else to say. I know I've hurt you and I know I've been unfair. I just want to come home. Please. It was the most genuine message I had received from her in years. I sat there staring at the screen, torn between relief and skepticism. Was this an actual apology? Or was it just another tactic to manipulate me? After all, she had said similar things before, only to fall back into old habits once the situation passed. But then I thought about the years of frustration I had carried, the endless attempts to prove myself to someone who never seemed to care. This wasn't just about the canceled ticket. It was about showing her that I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I took a deep breath and typed out my reply. Mom, I'll book you a flight home, but this is the last time I'm doing something like this for you. If you can't start treating me with respect, don't expect me to keep bending over backward for you. Her response came quickly. Thank you, I'll do better, I promise. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I booked the ticket anyway. It wasn't about trusting her, it was about giving myself closure. I wasn't doing this for her anymore. I was doing it for me, to end this chapter on my terms. When I sent her the flight details, her gratitude was immediate. Thank you so much, Kristen. I mean it this time. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. For once, I had stood my ground and set the boundaries I should have set years ago. As her return flight approached, I felt a strange sense of calm. No matter what happened next, I knew I had finally taken control of my relationship with her. 2 days later, I waited at the airport to pick her up. I could have let her take a cab home, but something in me wanted to see this through. Maybe I was looking for some kind of closure, or maybe I just wanted to see her reaction face to face. When I spotted her walking toward the arrivals gate, she looked different. Her usual confident stride was replaced with something slower, more hesitant. She clutched her carry-on bag tightly, her expression a mix of exhaustion and... was that humility? Hi, Mom, I said as she approached. Hi, she replied softly, glancing at me like she wasn't sure how to start. The drive home was quiet at first. I could feel the tension in the air, but I wasn't about to be the one to break the silence. Finally, as we pulled onto the highway, she spoke. Kristen, I owe you an apology. I glanced at her, surprised by her tone. It wasn't the begrudging half-apology I had expected. It sounded genuine. For what? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. For the way I treated you, she admitted. You didn't deserve that. You've always worked so hard to take care of me, and I never appreciated it the way I should have. I'm sorry. Her words caught me off guard. I had dreamed of hearing something like this for years, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure how to feel. Thank you, I said after a pause. I appreciate you saying that. I mean it, she continued. This trip made me realize how much you've done for me over the years. When I was stuck at that airport, I started thinking about all the times you've bailed me out, even when I didn't deserve it. And then I realized, you were right to cancel that ticket. I needed to see what it was like to fend for myself. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part of me worried this was just a temporary change, a momentary blip before she returned to her old ways. I'm glad you see that now, I said finally. She nodded, looking out the window. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to try to be better, for you. When we got to her house, she hesitated before getting out of the car. Kristen, thank you for everything. For the trip, for the flight home, and for putting up with me all these years. I know I haven't made it easy. I nodded. You're welcome, Mom. But from now on, things have to be different. I'm not going to keep letting you treat me the way you have in the past. If you want to be in my life, it has to be on equal terms. She gave me a small smile. Fair enough. As I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I felt like I had taken control of my relationship with her, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Maybe she would change, and maybe she wouldn't. But either way, I knew I had finally set the boundaries I needed to protect myself. And for now, that was enough. The days after her return felt oddly quiet. For years, my relationship with my mom had been a constant source of stress, a series of battles where I always ended up feeling defeated. But now, there was a sense of finality, like I had finally closed a door I should have shut long ago. Still, I couldn't shake the mix of emotions swirling inside me. On one hand, I felt relief, even pride, for standing up for myself. On the other hand, I wasn't entirely sure what came next. Would my mom really change? Or would this just be another cycle, where she made temporary promises only to slip back into old habits? She called me a week later. Hi, Kristen, she said hesitantly, her voice unusually soft. How are you? I'm fine, I replied, unsure of where this was going. I just wanted to check in, she said. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about what you said in the car. I didn't say anything, letting her fill the silence. I know I've taken you for granted, she continued, and I know it's going to take time to fix things between us. But I want you to know that I'm serious about trying. Her words sounded genuine, but I had learned to temper my expectations. I hope so, Mom, I said, because I meant what I said. I'm not going to keep bending over backward for someone who doesn't appreciate me. I understand, she said quietly. The next few months were a strange adjustment. My mom didn't call as often, and when she did, our conversations were more measured, even pleasant. There were no more passive-aggressive comments or guilt-laden requests. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I caught glimpses of her old behavior, a snide remark here, a pointed comment there. But each time I held my ground, calmly reminding her of the boundaries I had set. To my surprise, she started catching herself. Sorry, she'd say, almost embarrassed. I didn't mean that. It was a small change, but it felt significant. Meanwhile, I began to focus more on myself. For years, so much of my energy had gone into trying to win her approval, to prove that I was enough. But now I realized I didn't need her validation. I started taking better care of myself, both physically and emotionally. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, pursued hobbies I'd always put off, and even started planning a vacation for myself. A real vacation, not one that revolved around pleasing someone else. I also spent more time with my sister, Danielle. She had always been close to my mom, but now she seemed to understand my side of things better. I think you did the right thing, she told me one evening over dinner. Mom needed that wake-up call, and honestly, I think it's made her a better person. The next time my mom called, it wasn't to ask for anything. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, for everything you've done for me. I know I haven't said it enough. Her words caught me off guard, but they felt different this time, less performative, more heartfelt. You're welcome, Mom, I said, smiling. Our conversation ended without tension or resentment. It wasn't a perfect relationship, and I knew it never would be, but it was a start. I felt like we were moving forward, not because I had bent to her will, but because I had finally learned to stand up for myself. The weeks after my mom's return marked a turning point, not just in our relationship, but in how I saw myself. For so long, I had tied my worth to her approval, bending over backward to please her, hoping that one day she'd see how much I cared. But now I realized something important. I didn't need her validation to feel whole. Setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting myself from her, it was about reclaiming my sense of self-worth. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was different. My mom was trying, in her own way. The sharp edges of her personality were still there, but they didn't cut as deep. She thought twice before making a comment, catching herself more often than not. And I was stronger. When she made a snide remark about my new haircut during one of our weekly calls, I didn't let it slide. "I like it," I told her calmly, "and that's what matters." She paused, then let out a small laugh. "I guess it does." It wasn't much, but it was progress. More importantly, I stopped letting her opinions define me. I spent more time focusing on my own happiness, reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned, and setting new goals for myself. I felt like I was living my life for me, not for her approval. And in that newfound independence, I found a piece I hadn't realized I was missing. It wasn't about whether or not she changed. It was about the fact that I finally had. A month later, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Life felt calmer now, less fraught with tension and constant second-guessing. My mom still called me every week, but the tone of our conversations had shifted. She seemed less demanding, more thoughtful. I noticed little changes. She asked about my work, my friends, even my plans for the weekend. For once, it didn't feel like she was just waiting for her turn to talk. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, she surprised me with something I never thought I'd hear. "You know, Kristen," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about everything you've done for me. That trip, the way you handled everything. I realize now how much I've taken you for granted over the years." Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. "I want you to know I'm trying," she continued. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't undo that. But I want us to have a better relationship, if you're willing to give me the chance." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the weight of her words settle, wondering if this time they might really mean something. "Thanks, Mom," I said finally. "I appreciate that." It wasn't the grand apology I'd once dreamed of, but it didn't need to be. I wasn't looking for perfection anymore. I was looking for effort. As I hung up the phone, I realized that while she might never change completely, I had. And that was enough. I didn't need her approval to feel worthy anymore. I had found it in myself.